I'd like to tell you a story that I know. It's about an old preacher. One day he was on his way to revival, and he seen this young man standing beside the road, and for some reason, he just felt like stopping and picking him up. He got him into his automobile, and he introduced himself to him, and he said, "Son, where are you going?" He said, "Preacher, I'm going home. Oh, I haven't been home in a long time, and I'm sort of anxious to see Mom and Dad. I just hope they'd be glad to see me." The old preacher looked over at the young man, and he thought that was strange because any mom and dad will be glad to look down the road and see their son coming. He said, "Preacher, you don't know my background. You don't know the things that I've done in my life. When I was a young boy back home going to high school, Mom, she had to take in washings and ironings. And my poor old gray-haired dad had to get an extra job just so that I could graduate. And after I graduated, preacher, I got ashamed of Mom and Dad. I was ashamed of how they talked and how they dressed. I was even ashamed for my friends to come in and meet them. Well, one night, preacher, I came in very late. And me and my dad, we got into an argument, and I hit my dad that night. And I told him that I would never step foot into his house again. Mom, she cried and she begged for me not to leave. But I left anyway, and I went into the city, and I got myself a job. Oh, every now and then I'd hear from home. Mom, she begged me to come back. Seemed like just one thing led to another. It wasn't long, preacher, before I got into some trouble. I got into some bad trouble, and they had to come and take and put me into jail. And well, it just broke my poor old mama's heart, because everybody back home, they knew all about it. But it's been 5 years since I've been home. And the preacher said, "Well, son, if it's been that long, how come you're going back home now?" He said, "You see, preacher, about a week ago, I was walking down the street. And I heard some music coming from a little church across the street. And they were singing, 'Lord, I'm coming home.' And I began to think of Mom and Dad. And I was so ashamed to go inside, so I just stayed out there in the dark. But all that night when that preacher preached a message, it got a hold of my heart. He preached about a young boy that had left his father and went into the city and spent all that he had. And he finally had to get a job feeding the hogs. Oh, but one day he remembered home. And his father seen him a-coming afar off and ran and welcomed him with open arms. And that sort of reminded me of myself. So that night when the preacher gave the altar call, right there in the dark, I knelt down and I cried, 'Oh, Jesus, save my soul.' I wrote and I told Mom I wanted to come home. Preacher, we've got some apple trees in an orchard on the hillside, and I just told Mom if she'd let me come home for just a day or two to tie an old white rag in that tree, and when I'd come by, I would know. Well, the preacher said it wasn't long till they came to the place where he lived. So he asked the preacher, he said, 'Preacher, would you look on that hillside for me?' He said, 'Sure, son.' The old preacher looked on the hillside and he said, 'Son, not only is there one white rag tied to that tree,' he said, 'but there's white rags, sheets, and pillowcases tied to every tree on that hillside. And standing down beside the road is a precious old gray-haired Mom and Dad, just a-waving a big white sheet. Oh, you talk about the power of God coming down in that car.' They began to shout and to praise God right there. The preacher said, 'Son, don't you get out here. I'm going to take you on home. I want to meet that Mom and Daddy. I want to be there when that reunion takes place.' The paths of sin too long I've trod. Lord, I'm coming